As we come to chapter 23 of Matthew, we need to do a little review, because for some of the chapters before this one, Jesus has come to the temple and he has been talking to, in a very, I guess, basically cordial way, to the religious elite. And as he talked to them, they gave him some questions that he answered with questions, and he did not really get into a long conversation with them. But this is a particular passage where Jesus was no longer going to banter back and forth with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the people who were supposed to be in the know about God and faith. This particular chapter, Jesus is going to pointedly preach a sermon. And I guess if you look at this could be probably one of the last sermons he preached. He was facing death in a few days. He knew that. He understood that. And so before he left the temple, all of those who tried to embarrass him, who tried to trip him up, who tried to make him look really foolish in the eyes of the people that he was drawing to him in the temple, all of that came to an end with this chapter. Jesus, in the very first verse of chapter 23, is described as speaking to the multitudes and to his disciples. He said this passage is going to be a sermon that's being preached to the people who are already drawn to him and to the disciples, because he was finally going to put an end to all of the conversations he had had with the religious elite. He was going to finally indict all of these people as to what was going on and had been going on for centuries in the temple. So with that kind of background, we want to get into this, because this is known as the woe chapter. Not like you woe a horse, but like a bad woe. Oh my gosh, this is bad. And it was bad. There's about 7 or 8, depending on who's counting, woes to Pharisees, Sadducees, the religious elite. So he was going to preach a scathing sermon about what was going on and who was actually doing the wrong things. And it was the very people who were preaching about the right things to the people. Now, you say, preacher, how in the world can you be wrong and be preaching the right thing? You can. Because you see, he's going to talk about people who are hypocrites. Now, let me kind of define that word. That's a Greek word where we get our word hypocrite. It means pretend. Have you ever gone to a play, or you've picked up a playbill and there's a little thing up there that has 2 masks on it? One mask has a frowny face and one has a smiley face. You know what I'm talking about? Do like this and say, I don't know, but if that's okay, preacher. Okay. It's kind of a thing that the theaters use because there's acting going on. And in Jesus' day, in the Greek time, actors would use masks as they portrayed a play. They would hold up on a stick a mask that had a frowny face if they were the villain, or they would hold up a stick with a mask on that had a smiley face if they were the main good character in the story. And so they would use that, and they would pretend to be whatever that mask portrayed. And we get our word hypocrite from there. It doesn't always mean something bad, but in Jesus' day, hypocrites were actors. Are you with me? They were actors. Not necessarily bad people, but they were actors. But when Jesus came to these people, he called them hypocrites in the bad way, because they were just pretending to do what they were supposed to do. Now, there's always another side to hypocrite, and that is someone who is sincere. We need to kind of define that word. Sincere to us means we believe it. I mean, it's good. It's all good. No pretend, no fake. But sincere is actually a Latin word, sincere. I'm butchering Latin, I know. Sincere, which means no wax. How in the world do we get from good to no wax? Well, it goes way back into the times of the Romans when they were making statues. You may or may not know this story, but they would take time and they would carve statues by hand. by hammer and chisel. There wasn't any reciprocating saw. They just did it all by hand. And they worked on that thing for a long time. And they worked on it because it had been commissioned by someone to make the statue. And he's working on it one day, and all of a sudden he hits right up around here and he knocks the nose off. What are you going to do? Well, in our day, we just put epoxy on it, and there you are. But in their day, they would take wax. They would take the marble, and they would grind up the marble. They would put it with the wax, and they would fashion the nose and put it back on, and you couldn't tell the difference until they put that thing out by their pool, and the sun came out, and his nose fell off. So they would be pretty upset. So when they went to get the statue, the people would say, "Is this sincere?" Which means, is there any wax on it? No. It's all stone. Nothing fake about it. So with those two kind of definitions of hypocrisy and sincerity, Jesus is about to expose what's going on in the temple. The first thing he says, "Therefore I tell you," to the scribes and Pharisees, "they sit in the seat of Moses." You know where that would be in our church? Anybody got an idea? Where the seat of Moses would be in our church? Right here, the pulpit. They sit in the place where the gospel, not them, but the law was given. We stand behind this and give the gospel of Jesus Christ. Or some people don't even use one at all. I need one to lean on. But some people don't even do that. But this would be considered the seat of Moses, where the law is taught, or the gospel is given, or Christ is preached. And so he said, these Pharisees and these Sadducees, they sit in the seat of Moses. Therefore, in verse 3, whatever they tell you to do, observe it and do it. But do not do according to their works, for they say and do not do. That's hypocrisy, is it not? Hypocrisy is not necessarily failing to do what you believe in, but it's pretending to believe in something that you don't believe in. Does that make sense? So as they gave the law of Moses and they told the people what to do from the scrolls that they had, it was great. But they didn't believe it. So one of the woes that Jesus told that the Pharisees and Sadducees were doing was the fact that they taught about God, but they did not love God. Does that happen today? I mean, people today do that all the time. All you have to do is turn on the radio, watch something on TV. Sometimes even in our churches, there are people who teach, and what they're teaching is good, but the fact of the matter is they don't believe what they're doing. And then it all comes crumbling down when it comes to actually doing. It's what the sermon is titled today, Practicing What You Preach. Boy, that's going to be really hard. I've always heard, preacher, you better practice what you preach. And I always say, that's hard to do. That is very hard to do, because my wife knows me. And sometimes she looks at me and she said, you're just pretending. It's a good wake-up call, because sometimes, folks, believe it or not, preachers are human. You believe that? I sure hope you know that, because I make mistakes like everybody else does. Sometimes I make more. But I try never to be a hypocrite with who I am. And that's also a struggle too. But Jesus, openly as he preached, said, listen, everything these guys are telling you to do is good. But you need to understand that they don't do what they preach. In other words, they are hypocrites, because they are pretending to believe something they don't believe in. And it's very evident they don't believe in it, because their life shows that. Man, a wake-up call for us, isn't it? We can be such great people on Sunday, but on Monday we're the same person that we are the rest of the week, up until the time we walk into the doors back here, and then we become someone else. I've heard people say, preacher, you got a preacher's voice. They're saying a couple things by that. One, either they like your voice, or two, that you're pretending to be a preacher in the pulpit and you talk like everybody else doing the rest of the week. That's kind of fine line in it. But he said, first of all, the first woe is they are pretending to be something they're not. They're teaching God, but they don't love God. The next passage in here, the next woe, and I'm not going to read all of these 36 verses. Someone said, do we need a lunch today, preacher? No, I'm going to get you out in plenty of time. But the next woe begins in verse 13 through 15, that they preach God, but they don't really teach anybody true religion. They convert people to a dead religion. And he said that because they told everybody what they needed to do, but they didn't lead anybody to the kingdom of God. Now that's pretty blatant. I'm wondering by the time he gets to the third woe in here, if he's going to have these people throw things at him, because he's cutting them very deep. It's like me preaching a very hard and difficult sermon to you, and I'm just as guilty as you are about what's going on. It hurts. It hurts. Don't you like to be told what kind of hypocrite you are? Nobody raised their hand. I see that. Okay. But that's exactly what he's doing. And this is coming from the Messiah, the Son of God. And so he says, you're trying to convert people to a dead religion. And then he says also in verse 16 through 22, you're talking about people not swearing an oath to the temple. Now you have to understand, the temple was very important. The temple was the center of the Jewish life. Everything was supposed to happen in Jewish life that was centered around the temple. And there were things in the temple that were precious. There's gold there. So they defined a swear a little bit differently. If you swore by the temple, that wasn't too bad. But if you swore by the gold of the temple, that was pretty bad if you broke that swear. In other words, what they said and what they did were two different things. And so they said, because I'm not swearing by the gold of the temple, it's not binding. Do we have laws that we keep and some we can get around? Do we? Sign says, we've got a brother highway patrol back here. Sign says 75 on the highway, right? How many people do you catch and say, were you going 75 or were you going 78 or 80? Well, officer, I'm trying to do this or I'm trying to do that. How many of those people do you let go, brother? Okay. There are things we can get around. And sometimes it's a discretionary thing. I understand that. But see, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were teaching that, listen, there are some things you can do and some things you can't do. And there's little white lies and there's been really big ones. There's none. And he says, woe to you for doing that. And he says also that verses 23 to 24, he says, they taught about justice and mercy and faithfulness. No, they didn't. They taught about little things. You see, they believed that tithing also included anything they grew. Everything, I told you, everything robbed under the temple. So if you produced anything, you were supposed to give some of that to God. So they were talking about their herbs and their spices, and they would bring that to but they never talked about the thing that God's law really should be intended on focusing on, and that is justice. Those things of mercy of God, the faithfulness to God. They never talked about those things. Why? Because they didn't do them. So they focused on something else. If someone focused your attention on something else so you could get around what was really there, everybody done that? Have you ever done that? Tried to divert somebody with something else because we're not going to talk about the main thing we need to talk about? That's what they were doing with the word of Jehovah God. Then the next woe was verses 25 to 26. I hope you're marking these in your Bible. Okay? He talked about how good they looked on the inside, these teachers of the law, but on the inside they were filthy. It's just like, I went to the dishwasher this morning. I always have trouble with this. I go to the dishwasher and open it up to get something out of it, and I have to look at it. And I have to sometimes smell of it. Because it looks clean to me. And sometimes I use it, and Joan said, you didn't use that out of the dishwasher, did you? I hadn't even started that thing yet. You've done that. On the outside, it looks good. On the inside, it's very, very dirty. And he said, that's what you people of the teachers of the law, you religious elite are like. You dress in fine linens. You dress. And every time someone looks at you, they say, oh, there goes a man of God. There goes a person who there is no vile. He knows surely he's going to be in the kingdom of God because of what he does. You know, God doesn't look on the outside. I'm so glad. Because he looks on the inside, and that's what Jesus is saying. What God wants is a clean heart, not a clean body. Now, don't tell your kids I said this because they still have to take baths every day. When our kids were growing up, my son didn't think he had to bathe until Saturday. And then he complained about that. You've had them, right? But God says it's not what you look like on the outside. You can look really sharp on the outside. I've never been told I look really sharp. But you can look really sharp on the outside, but it's on the inside that God... On the inside, we want to be beautiful to God. Isn't that great? I'm so glad. Because I'm not going to say that. Yeah, I am. As I look at it in the congregation, some of you don't look sharp. But I know some of you on the inside are beautiful to God. And that's what he was saying. Now, I know you're going to go home today and say, preacher said we all are ugly. That's not what I said. Okay. And then in verses 27 through 28, he said, listen, I want you to understand that you need to be righteous, but you're not. What's righteous? Is it acting the way people think you ought to act? Is it doing the things that people expect you to do? What is righteous? Righteous is what God expects you to do. And in our day and time, because of Jesus Christ, we have been made righteous by his blood. That's what the Word of God says. We have been made righteous by the blood of Jesus Christ. Other than that, we are never in God's sight righteous. One preacher put it this way: God looks at us through the glasses of Christ. You heard of rose-colored glasses, right? God looks at us through the lens of Jesus Christ, through the blood of Jesus Christ. And all he sees is righteousness instead of what we truly are without Christ. Not beautiful, not righteous, not doing anything of worth. But because of Christ, because I believe in Christ, we are made righteous in his sight. But the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and then verse 29 through 27, this was a clincher. Jesus said, you guys profess that all the prophets before you, you wouldn't have killed them the way your forefathers did. You would revere them. And the way they did that was they made huge monuments on their tombs. And they dressed them up and said, they were great, when they're the very ones that the forefathers had killed. Some of them in the very temple, they killed them in the temple. But Jesus said, in reality, you're just like your forefathers. You are just like your forefathers. You haven't learned anything. Now, look in verse 33 of that chapter with me. Can you believe I got through that quick? Okay, I told you we're going to eat lunch. Verse 33 says, serpents, brood of vipers, how can you escape the condemnation of hell? Can you believe that? Jesus was a visitor to the temple. He drew all kinds of crowds around him every time he went in there. He was different. His preaching was different. His appearance was different. Everything about him was totally foreign to what they had been hearing. And he looked at those people who had run the temple, who kept the temple up, where the people were focused, and he said this statement: you are serpents. You're a brood of vipers. You're no better than snakes. You're no better than serpents. And your end is hell. How would you like it if somebody came in here and looked at me and said, preacher, you're going to hell? Would you like them to say that about your preacher? The correct response is no. Okay, thank you. But you know, this stuff is still going on today. This was just not put in the Word of God to look at those people back in Jesus' day and said, boy, they were terrible. But you know what they were? They're people like you and I. So why did Jesus do this? He did this to make us understand that people sometimes are not what they appear to be. And you need to look at people for what they do, not for what they say. My dad always told that to me. He said, son, don't do as I do, do as I say. And I've often wondered, where in the world he gets that? Chapter 23 of Matthew. Because you see, my dad understood this. He was not a perfect man. And he did things sometimes that he should not do. But he taught me that what he said from the perspective of God was better than what we do from the perspective of man. Now, the rest of that passage in verse 34 says, therefore indeed I send you prophets, wise men, and scribes. Some of them were killed and crucified. Some of them were scourged in this very synagogue, persecuted from the city to city, that on you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth, for the blood of the righteous, Abel to the blood of Zechariah the son of Berchan, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Assuredly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. He was quoting them the history of the temple as it really was, not as what they wanted people to see. Most of you in here are old enough to remember a man named Jim Jones, are you not? For those of you who are too young to remember, Jim Jones was a man who professed to be a prophet of God. And he convinced some people to buy some property in Africa and to move to Africa and there wait for God to return there in Africa. When reality came down, he was actually a charlatan. He even convinced those people to drink Kool-Aid laced with poison because there's no reason for us to live because God is coming and we can go to him. And when they found that encampment, there were hundreds of people, men, women, and children laying on the ground dead because they had followed Jim Jones. The man, Jim Jones. Folks, that didn't go away just because we found out about Jim Jones. That didn't go away just because we found out about what was really happening. It happens again and again and again because somebody said, I don't want to go to church because it's filled with hypocrites. It's not filled with hypocrites, but we do have hypocrites in the church. The big difference. I could look out over this congregation and say, and I wouldn't, you're all a bunch of hypocrites. Because I know what you do on Monday. No, I don't. Nobody knows what you do on Monday except God. And that's what Jesus was saying. We're acting sometimes, but God sees through the mask. Amen. Does that make sense? God sees through the mask what the intent of your heart is. And that's what God really wants. He wants you to have a heart for him. It doesn't matter what the preacher wants you to do. It doesn't matter what the church wants you to do. But I guarantee you when we do what we do for God, everybody's going to be on the same page. I can't say that you do at the church what you do so that someone else will look at you and say, what a good church member they are. Look at them. They're doing that for the church, the good of the church. When on the inside, someone will be saying, I want somebody to think good of me, so I'll do this. There are a lot of people like that, folks. That has nothing to do with the salvation of your heart. And I'm so glad because we cannot work hard enough to get ourselves approved by God. Amen. But even though we have those flaws, even though there is wax, God says in the flaws of the flesh, there are many. But in the heart that's focused on God, there is peace. Now, practice what we preach. We're going to be doing some radio spots And Paul is going to tell you more about it. But with those, what we want to do is project who we are. Christ Way Baptist Church, located right across the street from Bowen Elementary. A lot of people don't know that. You'd be surprised who do not know that. But we're wanting to project that we love God. And we love people. We want to be genuine. We don't want to be commercial. You say, Brother Gordon, you're using the commercial to be genuine. Well, yeah. That's how we get our word out. That's how people know about who we are. But never, never, never make the mistake of saying that is what God thinks we are. Just a commercial. Just a church that it's good. As you drive by our church, I got to be honest with you, it looks good. It looks really good. And if we just look at that church building and we look at the grounds and how well it's kept, we would think, man, that's a good church. And I keep telling you, this building is not our church. You are the church. You are the church. And your hearts are what God sees, not the inside of this building. And so Jesus was saying to those people who were the leaders, who were the people who taught the law, you're a bunch of people wearing masks and you really don't love God. You're there because you really love the applause. You love to hear people say, here comes the rabbi. Here comes the wise person. Here comes the person who, whatever they did for me. And they loved it. Don't you like praise? Do like this. Most people like praise. Most people like to be told they're appreciated. Preachers do too, by the way. What did you laugh for, Rusty? Okay. But that's us. That's our nature. We like to be praised for what we do. But you see, there's one person who is to be praised, and that's Jesus Christ. And when we're focused on Him, we don't have time to focus on us. And that's what he was saying with this. To the people who were listening that day in the synagogue, how many times do you think they looked at those scribes and Pharisees and the blood had just drained out of their face? Because they had portrayed themselves as the perfect people. Do you know any perfect people? I do. We call them actors. Boy, he was good in that movie. He was perfect. We call them actors. Man, we got a great congressman. We got a great preacher.
Yes.
Fits. We got a great president. You see what I'm saying? People can show you whatever they think you want to see. But God looks in the heart, and Jesus indicted those men that day, those leaders that day, cut them to their heart. And you know what they decided that day? What did they decide to do with Jesus? We're going to kill this dude. We're going to get him out of the way because he is not who we want him to be. And folks, we have plenty of people that disappoint us. But Jesus was disappointing in a good way. That's hard to use that in the same sentence, wasn't it? Jesus disappointed the people in the wrong way according to the Pharisees and Sadducees, but he was preaching the truth to the people who needed to hear it. So hear the truth this morning. The truth is, you can either pretend to do what you say you're doing, or there's no wax. There's no wax. You know, after reading this, I feel about that big. I don't know about you. Of all the shortcomings and things that I've done in my life that I know did not measure up to God's description of us as his followers. But you know the good news in all that? Even with our flaws, He created us in His image. Even with our flaws, He created us.
Thank you, Lord. Praise
And He also gave us a Savior that when our flaws showed up, He said, no wax. We'll cover those flaws with the blood of Jesus Christ, and we will have fellowship with man. And if you trust Christ as your Savior, that will continue even after this body, with all of its flaws, is long gone.
Lord, yeah, thank you.
So do you practice what you preach? That's a hard question for all of us, isn't it? It's a hard question for the preachers. So when I walk out this door this morning and someone says to me, preacher, did you practice what you preached today? I have to be honest and say, not everything. But I know one who does.
Thank you, Lord.
And I've put my faith and trust in Him. When my flaws are evident, His blood covers.
Praise the Lord.